He stole everything I built and left me with a good luck text. 1 year later, I made the whole world watch him get handcuffed and beg for mercy. I watched my entire career burn to the ground while my so-called best friend smiled at me from the stage, holding the promotion that should have been mine. Yeah, that was the exact moment I realized loyalty doesn't mean a damn thing in the corporate world. I'm Jordan, 34 years old, 10 brutal years of climbing the corporate ladder at Garrison and Harlow Investments, one of those skyscraper financial firms where dreams go to either be made or crushed. And let me tell you, I was supposed to be the golden story. The promotion to project director was practically in my hands. My boss had hinted at it for months. Late nights, working weekends, cleaning up messes other people made just to keep the biggest account in company history afloat. And the worst part? That other people was mostly Trevor, my best friend since college and the guy who was supposed to have my back. Trevor was charming, the kind of guy who could show up late, half prepared, and somehow still walk into a room and have everyone eating out of his hand. I used to admire that. Until the day he gutted me like a fish in front of our entire company. It happened during the annual G&H Winter Gala, a black tie event held at the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom. Think crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and more egos stuffed into one room than a Hollywood awards show. That night was supposed to be my night. I stood there in my tailored suit, my wife Emma holding my hand so tight her knuckles turned white. We were waiting for the announcement of the new project director, a position I had bled for. I knew it. She knew it. Hell, the whole office knew it. Then the CEO, Mr. Harlow himself, took the stage with that smug politician's smile. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Our new project director, the visionary behind the Pinnacle Initiative. My heart stopped. The Pinnacle Initiative? That was my project. My months of research. My late nights crafting strategies and projections so tight you couldn't poke a hole in them if you tried. But then, I heard it. Trevor Whitmore. The room erupted in applause. Emma squeezed my hand harder, but I couldn't feel it. Everything went numb. I just stood there, watching Trevor waltz up onto the stage like he owned the goddamn world. And the real punch to the gut? He started his speech by calling my project his personal brainchild. I remember the night this idea came to me, he said, smiling straight at me like this was some inside joke. I knew it could revolutionize how we manage high net worth portfolios. And tonight, seeing all of you here, celebrating this success, well, it's a dream come true. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The project plan I'd spent 6 months developing, the concept I'd foolishly shared with him over late night drinks when I thought we were just two guys dreaming big. He stole every bit of it, packaged it as his own. And worse, everyone believed him. Mr. Harlow raised his glass toward Trevor, then glanced at me. I swear to you, in that brief second, he knew. They all knew. But in a world where charm wins over hard work, who do you think they'd rather have at the top? I left the ballroom before the final toast. Emma chased after me, heels clacking against the marble floor. "Jordan, wait," she called out. I stopped outside by the valet stand, the freezing air biting through my suit. "You can't just walk away from this," she said, her breath visible in the cold night. I stared out at the city skyline, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. "What do you want me to do, Em? Go back in there and pretend this is fine? Clap for him? Toast to the future he built on my damn back?" She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with those tired, tear-filled eyes. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my home office, every email, every draft, every file from the Pinnacle Initiative open on my screen. And you know what I realized? I still had it all. The original timestamps, the planning documents with my name on them. Even audio recordings of our brainstorming sessions. Trevor's voice agreeing to every single point I proposed. And that's when it hit me. If Trevor thought this was over, he had no idea who he just crossed. But here's the kicker, and the part that kept me up the most. 2 weeks later, I walked into work, trying to keep my head down, figuring I'd just push through the humiliation and move on. That's when I saw it. A calendar invite popped up on my screen. Farewell lunch for Jordan Parker, conference room A. I hadn't resigned. I hadn't even been warned. But the meeting was booked. The end was already decided. And as I sat there, staring at that cold, clinical invite, my phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. "No hard feelings, man. Hope you land on your feet." That's when I knew. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was war. My thumb hovered over that message from Trevor like it was some kind of bomb waiting to explode. "No hard feelings, man. Hope you land on your feet." I swear, if I could have reached through that screen and dragged him through the mud, I would have. My chest felt tight. My vision blurred. I wasn't just angry. I was humiliated. cast aside like 10 years of loyalty meant nothing, like I was the fool for even believing hard work mattered. The office suddenly felt suffocating. People avoided my eyes as I passed their desks, whispering behind their monitors like I was already a ghost. A few even had the nerve to look relieved, like my departure made space for their own shot at climbing the ladder. And there it was, conference room A. I should have walked out. Should have kept my dignity and left with my head high. But something in me snapped. I needed to see it with my own eyes. When I pushed open that glass door, I swear the room fell completely silent. A cheap sheet cake sat awkwardly on the table, reading, "Best of luck, Jordan," like I was a retiree being put out to pasture. Trevor was already there, of course. Leaning against the far wall in that smug designer suit, sipping his coffee like he hadn't just burned my entire life down. "Jordan," he called out, that perfect salesman's smile plastered across his face. "Didn't think you'd actually show." I stared at him, feeling every muscle in my body tense like a spring ready to snap. "You planned this," I said under my breath, my voice shaking more from rage than fear. Trevor laughed, and shrugged. "Don't take it personal, man. This is just how the game's played. You know that. Gotta strike while the iron's hot." Strike while the iron's hot? I nearly lunged across the table right there, but I felt Emma's voice echo in my head. "Be better than him." So I turned around and walked out. Not a word. Not a glance back. But something in me shifted that day. I wasn't going to move on. I was going to burn his carefully crafted empire to the ground. For the next few months, I kept my head down. Officially, I was exploring new opportunities. In reality, I was gathering everything. I found the original project drafts, complete with timestamps and my name stamped all over them. Voice recordings of late-night brainstorming sessions where Trevor had sat there nodding along, saying, "Man, this is brilliant. You've got to pitch this." Guess he figured if I didn't pitch it fast enough, he would. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want revenge light. I wanted him to feel it in his bones. So I started reaching out, quietly, to his competitors. See, what Trevor didn't know was that the Pinnacle Initiative wasn't just a flashy project. It had one major flaw he'd overlooked. And guess who had the solution sitting neatly in his private files? Me. I arranged a meeting with Apex Capital, one of the biggest rival firms in the market. And when I walked into that boardroom, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I laid everything on the table, showed them the gaps in Trevor's plan, the future-proof strategy he didn't have. And they bit. Hard. Within weeks, I wasn't just working again. I was named their new director of strategic initiatives, a title even bigger than the one Trevor had stolen. But I wasn't done. Because then came the Horizon Summit, the biggest financial conference of the year. CEOs, investors, hedge fund managers, all in one place. And guess who was scheduled to give the keynote address? Trevor Whitmore. That was his moment. The pinnacle of everything he thought he'd built. And I was about to set the stage for his biggest fall yet. The night before the conference, I sent an anonymous tip to the event organizers and every major news outlet covering the summit. Attached were files. Undeniable proof that Trevor had plagiarized every major component of his so-called revolutionary project, complete with voice recordings, document histories, and, just for good measure, a side-by-side comparison of my original proposal against his final version. I didn't even have to show up the next day. But I did. I stood at the back of the packed auditorium, arms crossed, watching as Trevor took the stage under blinding lights, completely oblivious to the digital wildfire raging through every attendee's phone. He started his speech confidently. That same cocky grin, that same sales pitch voice. But as the minutes dragged on, the room grew. Quiet. People weren't clapping, weren't engaged. They were reading. Phones lit up everywhere. Eyes darted between their screens and the man on stage, their faces shifting from confusion to disgust, to something bordering on pity. And then, mid-sentence, the conference director stepped onto the stage. He whispered something into Trevor's ear. Trevor's face turned a shade of pale I didn't think was humanly possible. His hand trembled as he grabbed the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, I think there's been some confusion. We'll pause for a brief break." He practically sprinted off that stage, and I stood there, calm, satisfied. But here's the thing. This wasn't the twist. Because that night, after the summit had completely collapsed around him, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. One line. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you've started." I wish I could say that text didn't shake me, that I laughed it off like some cheap last-ditch threat. But the truth? It felt like the air around me snapped cold. I reread that message a dozen times. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you've started." That wasn't just a threat. That was a promise. For days after the Horizon Summit imploded, I kept looking over my shoulder. Every unknown number that popped up on my phone made my stomach twist. At night, I'd catch myself standing at the window, just staring into the street, wondering if he was out there, waiting. And then the real fallout began. Trevor lost everything. Apex Capital's announcement of their new project, built on the strategy I'd originally developed, went viral. Investors pulled out of Trevor's firm like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The board ousted him within 48 hours. His LinkedIn quietly updated to seeking new opportunities, and within a week, even that vanished. I thought that was it, that he'd fade into the background, licking his wounds somewhere far away from my life. But Trevor? He wasn't the kind of man to fade away. It started small. A rejection email from a firm I hadn't even applied to. Confusing, but I shrugged it off. Then came the calls. Recruiters I had spoken to suddenly ghosted me. One was brave enough to admit, "There's been some negative chatter about you, Jordan." Sorry. Negative chatter? About me? I knew exactly who was behind it. Trevor might have lost his job, but he still had connections. And he was poisoning every well before I could even take a sip. Emma found me one night at 3 a.m., sitting in the dark, scrolling through every industry forum and social platform, trying to figure out just how far the damage had spread. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "You can't let him win like this," she whispered. And that's when it hit me. I'd been playing defense. It was time to go on the attack. If Trevor wanted to play dirty, I'd beat him at his own game. But not by trading smears or empty threats. I wanted to end this permanently. So I hired a private investigator. Not some shady guy with a camera and a bad haircut. I'm talking top-tier, ex-corporate security. Discreet. Ruthless. I wanted everything on Trevor. Every skeleton, every hidden scandal. I wanted to know where he was, who he was talking to, and what cards he thought he was still holding. For weeks, nothing came up. He'd gone dark. No social media, no credit activity. Like he'd just disappeared. Until one night, my investigator called me. "Jordan, you're going to want to see this for yourself." We met in a dimly lit parking garage, because apparently that's a real thing people actually do when dealing with high-stakes information. He handed me a flash drive and said only one thing before walking away. "This goes deeper than corporate sabotage." I rushed home, plugged it in, and what I saw, I swear my hands went ice cold. Trevor wasn't just bitter and unemployed. He was involved in something illegal, financial fraud, off-the-books crypto laundering, shell companies linked to offshore accounts. And the kicker? He wasn't working alone. There was a name attached. My former boss, Mr. Harlow, the very man who stood on that stage and handed Trevor my promotion like it was some kind of party favor. Everything made sense. Trevor didn't just steal my promotion. He was placed there, fast-tracked to protect something much bigger. And when I blew his cover at the Horizon Summit, I didn't just embarrass him. I exposed a whole operation he was part of. And that text? It wasn't just a personal threat. It was a warning. I'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a ruined friendship or a stolen career. But before I could even process it, another message popped up on my phone. This time, it wasn't from an unknown number. It was from Emma. "Jordan, someone just broke into the apartment. I didn't even put my shoes on." Emma's message still glowed on my phone like a siren blaring through the dark. "Jordan, someone just broke into the apartment." My heart pounded in my ears as I dialed her number. It rang once, twice. She picked up, whispering so low I could barely hear her. "Jordan, they're still here." I felt my knees almost give out. "Where are you?" I hissed. "In the hall closet. I think they're looking for something. They haven't seen me." "Stay hidden. Don't make a sound. I'm calling the cops right now." I called 911, every second stretching into a lifetime. My mind raced through every possible scenario. What were they after? My laptop? Those files? Or something worse? I beat the cops to the building. Typical. The front door to our apartment hung open, the lock splintered clean off. A uniformed officer grabbed my arm before I could rush in. "Sir, wait. We've secured the area. But it looks like whoever did this left just moments ago." I didn't care about the apartment. My eyes darted around, searching for Emma. And then I saw her, wrapped in a blanket, sitting on the stairwell with a female officer, shaking like she'd just walked out of a nightmare. She ran to me the second our eyes met, and I held her tighter than I ever had in my life. "Jordan," she whispered against my chest. "They didn't take anything, but they went straight to your office. They were tearing it apart." My heart dropped. They weren't after money. They weren't even after me. They were after the files, the evidence. When the police cleared us to enter, I went straight to the study. The place was a wreck. Papers everywhere, desk drawers ripped clean out. But the flash drive? The one holding every bit of damning information on Trevor and Harlow's illegal dealings? Still hidden. Exactly where I left it. I slid it out from behind the false panel in my bookshelf and tucked it deep in my jacket pocket. Trevor was desperate. Desperate enough to send people into my home, knowing full well the risk. Which meant I had him exactly where I wanted him. I spent the next 48 hours making sure Emma was safe. She stayed with her sister while I put my plan into motion. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about ending them. I booked a meeting with the Financial Crimes Division. And I wasn't walking in empty-handed. I had everything. Wire transfers to offshore accounts, fraudulent company filings, voice memos of Trevor and Harlow discussing how to funnel investor capital through side channels. When the agents saw the files, their eyes widened like they'd just struck gold. "This is a career-making case," one of them muttered under his breath. "Good," I said, standing up, "because you're about to make yours and end theirs." But before I left that building, I made one more stop, a visit to my old company's HR department. I requested a meeting with the board under the official whistleblower policy. With a criminal investigation now open, they couldn't legally refuse. I walked into that meeting, stood before the same people who turned a blind eye to Trevor's fraud, and laid every piece of evidence on the table. By the time I was done, the room was silent. Mr. Harlow sat at the end of the long mahogany table, his face pale and damp with sweat. "Mr. Parker," he finally croaked out, "what exactly do you want from us?" I leaned in, locked eyes with him, and smiled. "Nothing. You're about to lose everything anyway. I just wanted a front row seat." But just when I thought the final curtain was about to fall, the twist hit me square in the face. The very next morning, I opened my email to find a message from an anonymous sender. The subject line chilled me to the bone. "You don't understand who you're really dealing with." Attached was a video file. My hands trembled as I clicked play. The footage showed a dimly lit room. Trevor sat at a table across from a man I didn't recognize. Older, sharp eyes, radiating the kind of quiet menace you only see in mob movies. And then I heard it. The older man leaned in and said, "You didn't think this was about money, did you? If those files see the light of day, it won't be your head on the chopping block. It'll be ours. And trust me, Trevor, you're not the one we'll be worried about." Trevor's voice was barely audible. I can fix this. I'll handle Parker." The man's smile was cold. "You've already failed. Twice." The video ended there, but it was enough. Trevor wasn't the mastermind. He was just a pawn. And I had no idea who I'd just declared war on. When you declare war, you better be damn sure you know who you're fighting. And I hadn't. That video haunted me for days. Trevor wasn't the top of the food chain. He was a middleman caught up with people far more dangerous. And now, thanks to me, they had a reason to come knocking. But here's the thing about people like Trevor and his puppet masters. They always underestimate the man they try to step on. I wasn't running. I was finishing this. I worked faster than I ever had in my life. Through my contacts at the Financial Crimes Division, I learned the investigation had reached federal levels. But this wasn't just about fraud anymore. It was organized crime. Money laundering, racketeering, tax evasion across international borders. And Trevor? He was the weak link. So I made my move. I requested a private meeting with the lead investigator, sat across from him, slid every piece of additional evidence across the table, emails, encrypted financial logs, and the kicker, a detailed blueprint of how Trevor and his shadowy benefactors had funneled millions through shell companies into illegal offshore accounts. But I didn't stop there. I gave them leverage. Names, meeting locations, financial trails so clean they might as well have been gift-wrapped. Trevor had painted himself into a corner, and I held the final nail for his coffin. And then it happened. The raid. I wasn't there, but I saw it unfold live on every major news network. Trevor's penthouse apartment swarmed by federal agents. Him being dragged out in handcuffs, eyes wide and hollow like he couldn't comprehend how fast it had all fallen apart. His face hit every news outlet. His crimes exposed in full detail. But the true final blow came days later, during his plea deal hearing. Turns out, when people like Trevor face decades behind bars, they start singing like canaries. He turned over everything on his handlers. And just like that, the men behind him, the ones who thought they were untouchable, were arrested in a multi-state sting operation that would become the largest white-collar crime takedown in over a decade. Harlow? They pulled him right out of his own retirement party in front of every investor who once praised him as a financial genius. The footage of him being led away in cuffs went viral. Poetic, really. Weeks later, I received a letter from Trevor, a pathetic handwritten apology from a federal detention center. In it, he begged me to visit, said he finally understood what real loyalty looked like. I tore it in half and threw it in the trash. But before I did, I wrote one sentence across the top in bold black ink. Some lessons are learned too late. It's been a year since the dust settled. Emma and I moved to a quiet coastal town, started fresh, and for the first time in my life, I sleep easy. Trevor? Last I heard, he took a deal. 10 years in a federal facility. He won't see the outside world until his hair's gray and whatever pathetic legacy he thought he built has long turned to dust. And Harlow? His name's a permanent stain on every financial journal in existence. His assets seized, his reputation dead. They thought they were kings, but they forgot one simple truth. You don't build an empire on stolen ground, because eventually it sinks. The lesson I learned. In the end, it's not about getting even. It's about making sure people like them can never hurt anyone again. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's patience. And when the time comes, you hit harder than they ever saw coming.